is Britain's most popular holiday resort, with over 8 million visitors coming every year. But many people do not realise that 150,000 people actually live in the town of Blackpool. Now, at the heart of the community and opposite the famous Winter Gardens is St John's Church. This has been a centre for Christian worship for nearly 200 years.
I believe this is Blackpool's first church, but what's its history?
Well, this church was built in 1878. It was actually on the site of an earlier church, but they needed a larger one, so this is in fact the second church. We know quite a lot about it because one of the vicars, William Thornber, was actually a local historian and wrote a lot of the history of the early Blackpool and of course of the church.
In medieval times, Blackpool consisted of a few farmsteads within Leighton with Warbeck. It took its name from Le Pool, a stream draining Martin Mere and Martin Moss into the sea near the present-day Manchester Square.
In the 1602 parish records for Bispham, you can actually see the mention of the word pool, and for the first time Blackpool. Now, Edward Tyldesley, who was the squire of Myerscough and the son of Sir Thomas Tyldesley, who was a royalist by the way, built the first house of substance here in Blackpool, and it was called Foxhall.
The modern Foxhall area, although now undergoing regeneration, is still recognised as one of the oldest parts of the town. From 1780 onwards, the early hotels were built by friends of the Tyldsleys, who during their early visits to the area stayed in local inns. Blackpool innkeepers John Forshaw, Thomas Goulter, John Hebson and Richard Hodgkinson are all listed on the 1755 Brewers List. Thornber mentions in his book that Edward Whiteside was the first to have a habitation fitted up for the reception of company. This small hotel was built near to Cocker Square and had the advantage of a supply of clean well water.
That cream building is the New Clifton Hotel, but is originally called Foreshaw's. This is the famous Metropole Hotel. Now, believe it or not, the first hotel on this site was built in 1776. This one dates from 1876. The original hotel was called Bailey's. Now, if you're into pub quizzes, this is the only hotel in Blackpool that's on the seaward side of the promenade.
In 1789, people started talking about building a church, but raising funds was a problem. The school was opened first, though, in 1817 and offered free education to local children and was called Blackpool's National School. But they changed its name to St John's.
Well, this is the basement of the main library in Blackpool, and this is where all the archives are kept. Now, it's known that in 1819, local people started collecting money to build St John's Church. From the archive, we know that the church was consecrated in 1821 because the Bishop of Chester came here to do it. Now, believe it or not, there are only 743 people living in Blackpool at that time.
Our early records show that the first burial at St John's was on the 14th of October 1821. Unfortunately, it was a 3-day-old baby called John Butcher.
I presume then it was quite common for children to die very early.
Absolutely. Thornber records a lot of the early days, and the poverty and the infant mortality rate was very high.
This watercolour by Gilbert Davis is absolutely amazing. And look at it, you can see the church and the school down the road, but there's not much in Blackpool itself. But you can see a few people on the beach, so it was starting as a holiday resort, but very few buildings, an awful lot of fields with ponds.
In 1848, the new railway connection between Preston and Blackpool was opened, which gradually resulted in an increase in the town's population. In 1861, this rose to almost 4,000. The same year, the church received the addition of a new tower, and St John's became the official parish and civic church of Blackpool. By 1871, the town's population had almost doubled to just over 7,000, and therefore in 1876 the old church had to be demolished to build a larger one. Lancashire architects Garlick, Park and Sykes were commissioned to design and build the new St John's Parish Church, which in June 1878 was completed and consecrated. At the consecration of the new building was the town's very first newly elected mayor, Dr. W.H. Cocker, who was actually the son of Dr. John Cocker. Soon after the consecration, this wonderful carved reredos, based on Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, was added to the church.
Now, the seas off Blackpool can be incredibly rough, and during the 19th century, records show that many members of the crews from the various lifeboats were killed trying to rescue other people. This memorial is to the crew of one boat, the Robert William, and most of them are quite young men who died trying to save others.
Blackpool's famous tower was completed in 1894, and tourist visitors' numbers increased dramatically each year. In 1913, 1 year before the outbreak of World War I, Lancashire and the town of Blackpool received a royal visit from King George V and Queen Mary. The crowds came out in their thousands, and local school children lined the royal route. The King and Queen can be seen here on the steps of Blackpool's Town Hall in Talbot Square, being welcomed by the Mayor. In 1915, St John's Church embraced the latest technology. It was one of the first buildings in the area to see the installation of electric light. And in 1929, this wonderfully carved memorial screen was added in memory of the victims of the First World War. In 1939, the town once again prepared for war, and the early 40s saw an influx of American GIs arriving in their hundreds. But even during this difficult time, St John's Church still carried on with its Christian support for the community, especially the marriages.
There were 14 weddings that day, and ours was the 7th at 2:30. And as most of the weddings were military in any case, because we were 4.5 years into the war by then.
When you were married, there was an awful lot of rationing in Britain. How do you get things for like a wedding cake or flowers for the church?
My wedding dress was given to me by my husband's sister. It was her dress, and she said I could have that, which released a lot of coupons for us to buy the bridesmaids' dresses. And I wanted 2 of the same colour, and there was a great trek around Manchester to get these 2 dresses. And yes, clothing was a big problem because you did have to find the coupons, and because all the families joined together and, you know, gave you some coupons to buy shoes, etc., etc.
Well, what about the traditional wedding photographs?
Yes, I have actually 3 official photos that were taken by the Gazette. Well, there was nobody else really to take them, but they were always very reliable. He only took 3, 2 large groups and just the 2 of us. And I think the reason was they may not have been allowed to take any more, but materials again and priority over certain items that were needed for the war effort, shall we say. Those were the only 3 which I've had to cling on to for all these 60-odd years. So.
Your husband was in the forces, so how long after the wedding was he sent abroad?
Like most of the newly married couples, they knew that the new husbands were about to be disembark to faraway places, and they was on standby for overseas duties. So after our 2 months of marriage, my husband went abroad for 2 years, so I didn't see him for all that time.
The church has continued to be a support to the community throughout the years, in good times and in bad. Being the civic church, many of the town's important funerals were held at St John's. This was the funeral of Jerry Richardson, a police officer killed in 1971 during an armed robbery in the town. Many of the local people came to pay their respects in great numbers. And again in 1983 for 3 brave officers, WPC Angela Bradley, PC Gordon Connolly and PC Colin Morrison, who all sadly lost their lives trying to save a man and his dog from drowning in the sea.
St John's is moving forward, but we've got to, because we believe that with a living God, you're with the culture, you've got to be with how things are changing. Jesus was with people all the time, and so we've got to move on and actually attract and speak to and engage the cultures around us, especially the young people.